All right. This week, the name on the marquee has got to be Sean Tarzan Strickland, who this past weekend, in front of 18,000 people at the, how do you say it, Kudos Bank Arena in Sydney, Australia, is now the UFC undisputed middleweight champion because he defeated Israel Adesanya by a unanimous decision in the main event of this UFC pay-per-view. The scores read 49-46 on all three judges' scorecards. Mark, let me start with you. Man, oh man, I did not think that we would be here talking about Sean Strickland defeating Israel Adesanya. What was your take on the fight, on Strickland's performance, on Adesanya's performance, the whole thing? The floor is yours.
Sean Strickland is the middleweight champion of the world, and defense wins championships. We know it applies in other sports. We didn't know it applied in MMA, but we do now. Sean Strickland's defense won him that fight. Izzy could not find him all night long. And I've heard this narrative of like, Izzy looked slow and Izzy looked off, and these fighters who are like, if I fought that version of Izzy, it wouldn't have lasted 10 minutes and blah, 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 blah. I completely disagree. Izzy just got shut down. He was still himself in there. Of course, yes, Sean clips him in round one, which was an enormous moment, and gets to put that round in his pocket. But Izzy was unfazed. He came out, he won round two, and he looked like his usual self. He was making his reads. He was feinting. He was freezing Sean. He was outlanding him. And then Eric Nixick, even after round two, went up to Sean, and he said he was letting himself get snake charmed. That's typical Izzy. That's what he does to guys. And it even continued into round three until Sean picked it up very late in that round to end up making that a close round. But the same Izzy was in there. It's just that Sean caught him in round one. And then after round three is when Sean got the speech from Nixick about not coming all this way to lose a fucking point fest and all this. And that's when he turned it up, and that's when he brought the activity. Prior to that, it was just pressure. Of course, he had the constant pressure from opening bell through all 25 minutes of the fight. But the activity wasn't there. That combo of activity and pressure is what won him the fight. And that was from the start of round four onward. And that's what took the final 10 minutes. And now it turned out that he did get round three on the cards as well. But my point is that the usual Izzy was in there. He was trying. He just got shut down because he could not find Sean with anything. Izzy is at his best when he can manage the range and decide when exchanges are going to take place. And Sean completely took that away from him. First off, he walked him down all fight and made Izzy constantly be walking backwards and have to reset. He parried the jab and slipped the jab all fight, so Izzy couldn't use it as a rangefinder and as a combination starter. He continually was lifting his lead leg upward and inward to lessen the impact of Izzy's calf kicks so that he could just put that leg right back down and keep walking forward. If you rewatch, you'll know what I mean. I don't know. It's kind of hard for me to describe what I mean, but he was like flipping it in at the knee, upward and inward to lessen the impact. He caught Izzy's body kicks multiple times. He was regularly just kind of backsliding his lead leg out of the way of kicks. I mean, he fought a perfect, beautiful defensive fight. Everything that Izzy wanted to do to establish range or to keep Sean from walking him down or to start his setups, it wasn't landing. None of it was landing. He even went back after round four, and he was like, I can't find my jab. He's slipping everything. And it's true. And he even took one of Izzy's favorite defensive tactics away and used it himself, which is to simply lean back, because he was always in space and was able to just kind of lean out of range. And you can't lean back when you're against the fence, and we know Izzy loves to do that. And that's why he was catching Izzy with his jab, because he has a long jab, and Izzy could not be leaning back out of the way. But all of that are things that we already knew Sean Strickland could do. Like, I know I picked Izzy simply because I figured, across 25 minutes he could set something up and land something big, and he'd take it. But I stressed last week why I thought Sean was such an interesting opponent for him, if you go back and listen. And it's because this is the same thing I said last week. What he had to do to beat Izzy was simply what he always does. Just bring constant pressure, be hard to hit, and it might go his way. He didn't have to reinvent the wheel to pull this off. And that's why, even though I picked Izzy, I'm really not all that surprised. Like, I even had someone say to me right before the fight started that if Sean won, it would be the biggest upset ever. And I laughed at him. Like, I was like, it wouldn't even be in the conversation. Like, I actually thought it was an awful take. And now, of course, it happens, and I'm hearing all these people calling it the biggest upset ever. So I guess it's me that's in the minority. But, like, I really thought going in that the style matchup made it so that Sean was live in this fight. Like, I truly didn't feel so surprised when it was over. And boy, was he ever live, man. He went 25 minutes with Izzy. It was not a fluke knockout. No question of the scoring. He won as clearly as you can win a fight. And he earned it so clearly that the Australian crowd was even cheering for him by the end because they knew how much he had earned that thing.
Omar, I want to get your opinion of where you think this ranks on all-time upsets.
I think the reason for me why it does seem like kind of an upset is because on paper, and I was listening to an interview that Chris Curtis did with Ariel Helwani, and I felt so validated in that moment because Chris Curtis is very close with Sean Strickland, trains with him and all that shit. And he was like, Sean Strickland does everything wrong. Everything Sean Strickland does and the way he performs is not the way you would learn how to do it. The way he blocks drives me fucking crazy. I'm gonna be honest. His like kung fu blocks that are like out here, you can't block shit like that. It's not supposed to work, but he makes it work, right? The Philly shell I have kind of less of a problem with, but there are things with how he blocks certain things, how he moves, his footwork in general, that's just like, this shit is just not supposed to work, but like God bless him because it does. And I think that's kind of the reason why, right? Like when you think of Adesanya, you think of, this elegant martial artist, this person who can, strike with the best of them. And I guess there's an expectation of what Adesanya can do. And I don't think Sean Strickland holds that same expectation when he fights, right? We expect him to be dirty. We expect him to be, the grinding fighter. But we don't necessarily expect him to outstrike the greatest striker that's currently fighting in the UFC. Like that's a rough one. You know what I mean? I don't know if that was really on anybody's bingo card. Sean Strickland catching Adesanya and winning a fight is completely different than I think what we saw over the course of 5 rounds. I thought that was a real eye opener, I think, for everybody who kind of has doubted Sean Strickland along the way.
I actually bet on Sean Strickland by decision. That's how non-shocked I am. Like, I picked Izzy on the show, but the odds for Izzy were so bad.
They're wild. They were wild.
That I was like, I kind of want to touch this fight, and I was like, Sean could win it, and if he wins it, it'll be a decision, and that's what I went with. So, like,
wow,
even that worked.
The real issue I had with that fight, and I know I don't want to say that Israel Adesanya looked off, because I don't think he looked off. I do think that he got shut down by Strickland. I think the punch in the first round, although he looked good in the second, I think it did mess with the way that he had an outlook for how that fight was going and how he wanted that fight to go. The real problem I had was that he didn't make reads. The way he normally make reads is that he does things, he feints obviously, and he adjusts. But he was feinting so much and he wasn't actually throwing things that were going to work. Everything that he was throwing just wasn't working, but he wasn't changing it. He was throwing the same shit over and over again. And it got to a point with in certain spots where it felt like insanity. Like, change up the timing, change up the angle, change up he wasn't really going to the body as much as he should have for all the blocking that was happening on in the head. There should have been a lot more combos to the body, a lot more hands to the body. It's just, I just wish he would have made those reads the way I think he could have in general with the way that he strikes. I think that was kind of why there's an expectation there and why I think there was so much disappointment. And probably why people thought that he didn't look right? Like, maybe because we expect him to make those kind of reads, those adjustments. And maybe it was Sean Strickland that just shut him down completely in that sense. Maybe after round 1, Israel just was kind of just focusing and going on autopilot, not really trying to, like, we've seen Izzy fight to not knock a guy out, right? Just fight to sort of not lose. And it's very possible that after because he was aggressive in round 1, and it's very possible that after round 1, After he got knocked down, he was like, all right, well, I got 4 rounds to not fuck this up. And just kind of went with that mentality, which didn't serve him well and generally never serves anybody well.
I feel like I had a little bit of an opposite reaction during round 1. I felt like coming off of the energy of Adesanya's last performance, his last 2 fights, both times fighting Alex Pereira, a guy who is much bigger than him in the octagon, and a guy who possesses real dangerous weapons in his hands. Compared to those fights, especially the second fight, where Adesanya I felt seemed to me much more dialed in when he was in the cage with Pereira. I felt like in the first round of this fight with Strickland, I swear, live watching it, round 1, I was like, Adesanya looks like, not that he's checked out quite that much. I don't want to go that far, but I felt like it's that kind of thing where like he thinks he knew that he was better than Strickland, and I felt like his foot was not on the gas with Strickland, and I feel like I sensed that in round 1, and I was like, he might pay for that, and he did, dude. By the end of round 1, he got dropped because Strickland is smaller than him. Strickland's only like what 6'1", so Adesanya is taller than him. He looks down on him. And Adesanya's like, I'm a world-class kickboxer. This guy's not. And dude, he paid for it.
The hook that Adesanya threw was reckless as fuck, though. Like, let's be clear. That hook was like, I mean, he threw that shit from out here. I mean, his whole everything was exposed. And he got cracked because Sean Strickland came right down the middle. And a straight line is going to beat a circle every time. And Adesanya had, like, if he was tighter in that moment, it wouldn't have been a problem. But I think he's gotten away with so many firefights, especially with Robert Whittaker, because that's the same type of hook that he's thrown with Robert Whittaker.
Yep.
And it fucking murdered Robert Whittaker. But like that hook, the way he was throwing it, he was super, super open and super outside. And he was in a very closed situation there against the cage. So there wasn't a lot of room for him to move, to duck and dodge and do whatever he generally does, maybe to get out of the way. So it was just... Maybe it was the pressure, man. I mean, the pressure from Sean Strickland, don't get me wrong, is a motherfucker. I mean, that I think is one of his greatest assets in general, is the pressure. And I think it does mess up people like Israel Adesanya. I could actually equate it to a chess match, right? We love talking about chess, and we love talking about like how chess and fighting are very similar. When you have a grandmaster, right, these guys that are ranked number 1, number 2 in the world, whatever, some of these chess matches that they play can go on for quite some time, right? They're not generally super fast. If you take some of those guys and you take them down to like the Lower East Side in Manhattan and you put them up against Grandpa with a clock and 2 minutes, shit changes, dog. They're not the same grandmaster anymore. That is, it's completely, speed chess is a completely different game. And I say that because there's more pressure, right? You don't have the time to sit there, think about your move and kind of calculate and judge the board the way you would when the time is literally going to eat you alive if you do that. So Sean Strickland, I think, has that effect where he creates that time. He has that clock going. And Israel Adesanya was backing up and moving laterally and backing up. And he just got to a point where he was riding the fence for the entire fight. And it really sucked to watch, man. And I knew Izzy was in trouble once we had gotten to a point where he started shelling up, like just ready to take shots. I didn't like that at all, and I knew we were in for a rough night.
Dude, I was so disappointed.
I was sorry, Mike, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was getting ready to make almost the same exact comparison, so it's funny that you just did that. But I was gonna say, for anyone that plays basketball, you have those nights sometimes where nothing is going in, and you're like, what the fuck? Why can't I make a shot right now? Like, I'm doing the same shit I always do. Nothing is going in, and it gets in your head where you just start to feel like you can't make a shot. And I feel like that was happening to Izzy. I get what Mike's saying. I do think it's very possible that he kind of went in there with a calmness where someone who is as elite technique-wise as him, he looked at Strickland's game and he was like, my technique is going to shine here. All I got to do is be calm, and I got 25 minutes, and I'm going to find a way to pick this dude apart as the fight goes on. I could completely see that being his mindset. But then I think that what Omar just said and what I just said is what happened as that fight went on, in that he had no chances to reset. He had to constantly back up. And as I was saying before, all of his initial strikes to set things up and to start combos and to make Sean move certain ways, they weren't doing what they're supposed to do. Sean was finding ways to nullify all of them. And I do think there was plenty of times in there where Izzy was like, what the fuck? Like my things that work are not working. And he was kind of feeling like, what's going on? Like, I'm supposed to be better than this dude.
Yeah.
And it was just too late. And I even think maybe that round 2, I think he was maybe still confident after round 1, and then he won round 2, and he was like, all right, I'm going to keep fighting like this, and I'm going to be fine. And then it's round 3, and he's like, did I drop that round? Did I get it? And then round 4 is the round that he like clearly lost, and you could see that's the round where he came back to the corner, and he was like, I can't find this guy. And that's when the frustration was really hitting him. And then same thing happened in round 5, and it's just he was out of time.
And it makes me wonder, like, was there ever even a consideration in changing up the approach, right? After how many rounds are you like, maybe striking a distance with this guy the way I'm doing, it's not going to work. Maybe let's try working in the clinch. Maybe let's try seeing if we can, put the pressure on. I don't want to assume that that's just something that you can all of a sudden do, obviously, right? But it just seemed to me that with all the trouble he was having throughout 20 minutes, especially knowing in the 5th round, he had to have known in the 5th round that he was going to lose that fight if he kept going. Like, at what point do you just change it up, do something different? Like, I keep thinking about Cejudo losing that first round. What was it, against Marlon? And then, was it against Marlon? Who he fought? I can't remember who the fuck it was now. But he fought somebody, and he dropped the first round, and he looked like he was getting beat on. And he came back in the 2nd round and beat the holy shit out of whoever it was. And he made these adjustments. He looked completely different than how he looked in the 1st round, approached the fight completely differently, and completely won the fight as a result of that change and
Marlon Rice?
That adjustment. Yeah. Nice. Oh, you meant Cheeto. My bad.
Yes.
Yeah, my bad. Rice. So, yeah, so that's kind of my point, is there wasn't that adjustment that I would expect from somebody at Izzy's level. And I really think that's where all this upset stuff is coming from. It's just, I think we had expectations, and it's not necessarily that Sean Strickland couldn't win, but Jesus Christ, you couldn't tell me the way that he won wasn't crazy as fuck.
Oh, it was special, and I will never forget that fight. I
can't watch that fight again.
I guess my point was more just I think too many people looked past the trickiness of the style matchup.
Yeah.
Yeah. But on the other hand, I feel like calling it the biggest upset ever, I'm like, let's calm down. To me, it's not.
I mean, I still, the big one in my head is GSP and Sarah.
Agree. That's number 1.
Yeah, I mean, that shit's crazy. That's wild.
Like, yes.
Like,
given where the great Matt Serra kind of was in the welterweight picture at the time compared to what GSP was.
He had won tough to get back in the UFC. He wasn't even, he had been out of the UFC.
And GSP was GSP. Like, he was a nasty dude at the time.
So tell me, remind me, if you guys know, how did Matt Serra wind up in a title shot?
By winning tough.
That was the prize.
Tough. Yeah. It was guys that had been in the UFC and were now out getting a shot to win tough and return to fight GSP.
Did they have, was it Tough Redemption or some shit? Did
Something
they have
like
a name for it?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and so
the
no
whole
one
was like creating a buzz for a challenger for GSP.
And no one gave GSP a chance, or no one gave Matt Serra a shot. Everybody said Matt Serra was too small, that he was just a jiu-jitsu guy. There was no way that he was going to beat GSP. And he overhand rights the fuck out of GSP and just destroys his whole life. I mean, it was amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Peña over Nunez was way bigger than this.
Oh,
I
that was
think
huge.
Of others.
Sure.
Also, to me,
given
the context of the upset, because Adesanya just recently lost. He just recently got TKO'd.
Agreed.
And then he got the belt back, and now he has lost again. So that recent loss to Pereira kind of took the shine a little bit off. Like, to put it in comparison to me, Holly Holm beating Ronda Rousey. Holly was the first person to take Ronda off the throne. And to me, that right there, I mean, honestly, I didn't even think about Sarah versus GSP, but Holly defeating Ronda in the way that she did, to me, was a bigger upset because Ronda, up until that fight, was Ronda. She was like this juggernaut who was just invincible in the women's bantamweight division. And the way that Holly beat her, finally sort of exposing the weaknesses in Ronda's game in the way that she did. That, you know, that infamous moment where she ducked under Ronda's like left hook, and Ronda like stumbled to her knee, and the crowd was like, "Oh my God!" I think that was like moments before, maybe the finishing sequence, or maybe a round before.
Oh,
anyway,
watching Ronda get head kicked was just tragic.
That was crazy,
it's tragic.
Dude. But again, I think that was a bigger moment than this because Adesanya just lost this past year to Alex Pereira.
Yeah, but him losing to Alex Pereira wasn't a shock because he's done it before. That's happened before. So no one thought that was going to be a big deal, right? Like the Nunes Pena thing. For me, I kind of feel that way about Pena the way that Mark feels about Strickland. Like I kind of had an idea that Pena could definitely win that fight.
That's true. You felt similarly in that one as I do now.
Yeah, you know, I thought Amanda Nunes was Amanda Nunes. I thought she'd get it done, but like Pena, the way that people were writing off Pena, I thought was an absolute mistake.
I do remember you saying that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, look, on the one hand, though, I will say this. On the one hand, losing to Sean Strickland in this way, in a unanimous decision, to me, as much as I love Adesanya, and I love Adesanya, man, he's such a star, it takes a lot of shine off of his legacy to me at this point. Like the man, I want to say he should still be considered in his prime, and to lose in this way to a guy like a Sean Strickland, respect to Sean Strickland. That being said, on the other hand, calling it like the biggest upset ever, I'm like, let's slow our roll here. Let's slow our roll.
Maybe I can finally stop hearing people say that he is the middleweight GOAT because he's fucking not.
I mean, like piggybacking off the... Right. Just exactly. Like to go a little bit further with the point that I just made, taking a lot of shine off of his legacy to me. This never would have happened with Anderson. Like Anderson in his prime just was so much better than everybody.
Yeah, but that's also a result of the times as well. Nobody was training Muay Thai though. Like, look at the way he ragdolled Rich Franklin. Rich Franklin was a motherfucker in his era. And he came in there and made Rich Franklin like he had never even heard the words Muay Thai before. Like, it was just a different time. Israel Adesanya, for him to be such a great striker in an era where everybody is learning striking at a better level than what they were back then, I think says a lot more about, you know, his level and where he's at. I don't think we should write him off. I mean, Anderson Silva, you're never going to hear me say a bad word about Anderson Silva. I love Anderson Silva. He's one of the reasons I started following the sport as hard as I did.
I don't even think Izzy is some advanced version like you're saying. I think if you put Prime Anderson in a cage with Prime Izzy, I would pick Anderson.
You know, I would say that now, to be honest, because there's the Izzy that
old Anderson had a competitive fight with Izzy.
No, he did, but I also think that was something that was allowed, right? Izzy also didn't really put the pace on him, didn't really get crazy with it, and I feel like Izzy that was one of his more like boring fights, was the fight against Israel Adesanya, or was against Anderson Silva.
I mean, he's had a
but
few.
Izzy's he has, and I think that's really the issue. Is
like so did Anderson. Let's not pretend he didn't.
Well, the Damian Maia fight will live in infamy forever.
Those were boring for a different reason with Anderson. Those were boring for a different reason.
Was it Cote? Was the other one?
No,
I feel like Cote was competitive. Cote made it competitive.
Yeah, I don't think Cote would have even allowed a boring.
Thiago Leites.
Yes,
that was a boring one.
Yes,
it was a terrible fight.
Yes, Maia and Leites. Those are the two I'm thinking of.
Well,
his Brazilian countryman.
He took it easy.
There you go. People used to say that he took it easy on Brazilians.
Yeah, I like the way that Izzy fights. I still think he's a great striker, but there is something that does seem off about the way he's been approaching these fights. And it could be, I mean, there's how many fights has he had? He's had 3 fights in what? Months? Not even a year at this point? Yeah. I mean, he's one of the more active champions that there are. We're still fucking waiting for Stipe to come back. I know he's not champion, but
yeah,
what the hell's happening there? Jamal Hill was like not even scheduled for a fight, and he's already gone from champion to not. Same with Yuri Prohaska. Like, Israel
We've
Adesanya has
waiting
been at
forever.
work.
No, it's true. It's true.
Yeah.
I'm not knocking it. I love Izzy. I've said it before on the show. I love Izzy. I'm not trying to knock him. He's just number 2, and I always thought that. So I hope other people see that too.
I mean, but again, Omar, your point about different eras, it is slightly different eras, and the point is well taken. Let's, in the interest of time, start to move this thing along here. Let's talk about what can be next for these two gentlemen. A big talking point in the world of MMA since this fight ended this past Saturday night, rematch or nay? Dana, I believe in the post-fight pressers and some interviews, was saying, yeah, rematch makes a lot of sense. I've heard a lot of talking heads and also people online saying, at this point, Adesanya has now lost 2 of his last 3 title fights. Doesn't deserve an immediate rematch at this point. Omar, what do you say?
So, from a meritocracy standpoint, he should not be getting another title shot. He got beat fair and square from essentially 4 rounds. The 3rd round, I'm not even going to die on that hill at this point. But he lost that fight, man. He didn't get caught. This wasn't like, the fight with Alex Pereira. He was winning that fight up until he wasn't. And so everybody was like, well, I wonder what would happen if it happened again. Like, the Sean Strickland one is not the same deal. I do think that Izzy should be fighting at least one more to get back in the mix. I think Dricus probably makes the most sense if Dricus is not going to get the next title shot. But the reason why I think they're talking about Adesanya getting the next title shot is because it's a big possibility that there's nobody who's going to sell the way that Adesanya is going to sell. I mean, who are you going to put Sean Strickland up? Sean Strickland is not a proven, money grab at this point, right? I would assume that this was probably not on the UFC's bingo card either, as far as having to figure out how to market this dude, who they probably had to cut so much footage.
Supposedly, he has had shocking, click reach since this event.
Really?
I was reading that Dana said that the video of him putting the belt on Sean's waist that he posted has double the views of what his follower count is. So his follower count was 8 million, and it has 16 million views. Some crazy shit.
So it's very possible that they're gonna go in that direction, man. I mean, I think at the end of the day, they're not gonna do it because of who deserves it. I'm gonna be honest, in this situation, I don't think they give a shit. I really think at this point it's gonna be about who's gonna make the most money, who can headline a big event. And Sean Strickland and Adesanya, I think, would still sell. I think it would still sell a lot more than a lot of the other names that you could potentially put in there, like a Dricus, even somebody like a Jared Cannonier for Sean Strickland to get that one back. I don't see people dying to buy a fucking pay-per-view for Sean Strickland and Jared Cannonier. Just saying.
Right. No, I mean, I totally agree. I think because Adesanya has a certain degree of mass market appeal that Strickland, I mean, it's interesting to hear that about his clicks with the title getting put around his waist. Does Sean Strickland perhaps have a certain sort of an everyman type of appeal or an anti-hero type of appeal? Yeah, but Adesanya still is a superstar, and he's a personality. Adesanya is a personality, and he is a brand in and of himself, and that's, to me, that's the real difference when a guy crosses over from being a UFC athlete to a brand in and of themselves, like a Conor or like an Adesanya or like a Ronda. So yeah, I mean, Strickland, I don't think he has, and Cannonier certainly hasn't. Cannonier's a quiet, nice, seemingly a nice guy.
Likes rocks.
What's that?
He likes rocks.
He likes rocks?
Have you not seen the rock game of Jared Cannonier?
No.
Dude, he talks about it in his post-fight interviews sometimes.
Bro, he looks like a Power Ranger the way he puts him up and has energy channeling through his rocks and shit.
Yeah. He holds
energy crystals?
I don't know if they're always I think they're rocks, dog. I think they're just straight up rocks.
He's said about crystals before too.
He does. Yeah. Well, yeah. I've seen the rocks.
The Stricklands, the Cannoniers, the Duplessis of the division, these guys are UFC athletes, but they're not personalities and brands in and of themselves, at least not yet. So yeah, Adesanya is going to sell way more than any of these guys, I believe. I believe at this point. So
I get
Tell
it.
you what,
It-
I was just gonna say it was a bad time for Robert Whitaker to lose, man. What a
I know, I was thinking that too.
what a shit time for that kid to have had a loss. His first loss,
dude, Whitaker
essentially in the
versus
middleweight
Strickland was a
division.
great fight.
Yeah, and the only person that kid has lost to is Israel Adesanya until DDP like a few months ago. And look at that, the middleweight division has opened its ass. Like Robert Whitaker would have been right there, front and center, foot already in the door.
Yep.
And
Yep. They would have faced him
torch
off.
drop.
It would have been
cage,
all of
probably.
us would have been like, well, it has to be Whitaker. Like,
Exactly.
it would have been so obvious.
Mark, what were you going
Exactly.
to say?
But no, I get obviously the whole marketability argument, which I think is why Dana was so quick to say like, yeah, the rematch would be interesting.
Yep.
But I really do feel like you got to be careful, and that Izzy losing 2 of his last 3 fights and losing the title in 2 of his last 3 fights is a bit too much to just throw him back in there. I don't think we can just be so cavalier with the immediate rematches. As Omar said, the first Pereira fight, he was winning it until he didn't, so it was a lot easier. This one, he lost, man. He lost really clearly. So I would really like to see him have to win another fight. If you're so concerned about the marketability, I mean, it would obviously suck for Duplessis, who is the rightful number 1 contender, if we're just going off of that. So if it's not going to be Izzy that fights Strickland, it should be him. But it wouldn't shock me if they're like, all right, you know what we'll do? We'll do Izzy and Duplessis right now and capitalize on that rivalry, and that's how we'll, hopefully reignite the fire under Izzy, and we'll do that, and we'll have Sean fight, a Cannonier or whoever, and maybe we come out of there with Sean and Izzy winning, and then we're ready to go. And not to mention, you have Chimaev and Costa happening soon as well. Chimaev, excuse me, I think I stuttered over that. So, like, if Khamzat wins that fight, he's going to be a fucking big deal in this division as well. So, there's a lot happening that you can kind of try to set up here. But, yeah, it wouldn't shock me if they immediately go the Adesanya-Duplessis route to get that fight to happen.
So a number 1 contender fight.
Yeah, while Sean fights someone else, which I guess would have to be... See, I don't think if Chimaev beat Paulo Costa, I don't think they'd go right to Sean fighting Chimaev, because I kind of think they want to set up the Izzy-Sean rematch. So maybe it'd be Cannonier that they give Sean, which is fair. I mean, Cannonier was just the backup, and Dana likes to reward people that were the backup, so it really wouldn't shock me if that's what they did. But it could go a million ways. This is, everything we're saying right now is pure guessing. There's a lot of ways this could go.
Yep.
Strickland has not fought Costa, no?
Nope.
God, what a fight that would be. Oh, my God.
Yeah.
I mean, it is also very likely that if Adesanya doesn't get the immediate rematch, and if Adesanya fights DDP, Strickland might not be there by the time he gets back to a title shot. Strickland might lose to Cannonier. Strickland might lose to Costa. Strickland might lose to anybody.
I mean, if we're being fair, Strickland hasn't lost to fucking anybody in the middleweight division. I don't think he lost the fight to Jared Cannonier, for being completely honest.
We both
And the only other person he's lost to is Alex Pereira, which is apparently going to happen nowadays. So Sean Strickland is not, I mean, for all the shit Sean Strickland gets, for his fight style and stuff like that, and I will die on that hill. It works, good for him, but like, I can't stand it. It's like so wrong in so many ways, but again, it works. But you can't knock him, man. He's literally won all of his fights at middleweight with the exception of the ones that we just mentioned. So,
bro, I feel like I have not picked Sean Strickland. I'm looking at his record. I know I picked Adesanya. I picked Abus Magomedov to beat him.
You did. That was a wild one.
I probably picked Imavov to beat him because I like Imavov. I might have picked Cannonier. I probably picked Pereira to beat him. It's about time I should come
I
around.
did pick Pereira to
picking
beat him.
I actually think I picked him in every single one of those fights until Izzy.
Jared Gordon.
I remember
Jared
I thought he was going to
Cannonier, I
wrestle
picked.
Pereira, and then I was annoyed with myself when I got it so wrong.
I'm pretty sure I picked Strickland in the Cannonier fight, and I was so annoyed with how that fight ended up.
Yeah, but I don't feel bad about it because he won.
Wow.